Hi, I'm so excited to be here today to present some preliminary findings from interviews we conducted with Palestinians and Israelis who drink ayahuasca together. This study is a collaboration between the Imperial College London's Center for Psychedelic Research and between MAPS. This is also a collaboration between the three of us, Dr. Leor Roseman, who's a researcher at Imperial College, an Israeli researcher, and Antwan Saca, who's a Palestinian peace activist who, among many things, facilitates workshops with Palestinians, Israelis, and Germans to understand how trauma informs policy. The three of us decided to join forces to better understand how to intentionally leverage psychedelics' great capacity to heal some of our global wounds and to build society and community based on trust instead of fear. So we started trying to learn from psychedelic traditions how we might be able to improve our current modes of conflict resolution, restorative justice, reconciliation, and peace building. So we have a multi-year project to develop a protocol for psychedelic peace building and conflict resolution. And we decided that our first step had to be interviewing Palestinians and Israelis who are already drinking ayahuasca together. I'm going to start with a bit of setting and background. Then I'm going to discuss 4 of the emergent themes that have come up, but there are really many, many more. The 4 I'm going to speak about today are this all one and all is unique. The way that these experiences impacted people's connection to their own religious identity, and also how it impacted their connection to the other, and also this concept of peace starting from within. So our mental set and setting approaching these interviews was really trying to understand if ayahuasca can help heal political cycles of trauma. For millennia, indigenous communities around the world have used plant medicine in ceremonies for the protection of intergenerational peace. And many communities also use psychedelic ceremony and plant medicines in active conflict resolution. Currently in Colombia, UMIAC is working with multiple indigenous communities who have joined together to hold yahe or ayahuasca ceremonies with people from opposing sides of the civil war in Colombia. So far, we've interviewed 18 Israelis and 13 Palestinians. 6 of the Palestinians we interviewed were Muslim and 7 were Christian. And it's important to note that actually only around 2% of the Palestinian population is Christian. And we suspect that Christians were a bit overrepresented in our interviews because Christian Palestinians do experience relative access and privilege compared to Muslim Palestinians, though it also could just be a reflection of our outreach as researchers as well. 4 of the Palestinians we interviewed live in Palestine, considered the West Bank by Israel, and 9 Palestinians we interviewed have Israeli citizenship and live in Israel. And actually 20% of the Israeli population is Palestinian. We interviewed 13 women and 17 men and 1 gender nonconforming person. People drank between 10 and hundreds of times, and honestly, a lot of the people we interviewed drank a lot, and I do think that definitely informs some of their responses. Everyone, without fail, made very clear that their intention for the ceremonies was not about making peace in the Middle East and was really about their self-healing and self-growth, which would be quite different from the study we're developing over the next few years, where we'll be inviting people with an express intention of doing work in the greater context as well. It's also worth noting that the Palestinians, many of them joining these ceremonies, there aren't so many opportunities that do not involve Israelis to drink ayahuasca in this region. Conversely, there are quite a lot of opportunities for Israelis to drink ayahuasca, so Jewish Israelis who drink in these groups definitely probably a self-selection bias a bit differently. The interviews were conducted in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. And by that, I mean Leor conducted the interviews in Hebrew, and Antwan conducted them in Arabic, and I conducted a few in English. Besides language, we recognize that our religious, national, gender, professional identities all really inform our questions and our interviews. So just for some context about who we are, the people conducting the interviews, Antwan was born in Jerusalem. He's Palestinian, and he's Christian, and he lives in Bethlehem. He studied politics, and he's been a lifelong peace activist. Dr. Leor Roseman was born in Haifa, Israel. He's Jewish. He lives in London. He studied psychology, and he's now a neuroscientist there. And I am also Jewish, and I was born and raised in New York City. I live in LA, and I'm lucky to work for social and political change. Oh, and I studied history and social work. The ceremonial setting involved mostly male facilitators with women and gender nonconforming folks assisting. The studies took place across Palestine, Israel, Europe, Brazil, and Peru. Palestinians were mostly a small minority in these groups and often sat together. The cultural setting, which we know, set and setting greatly impacts the psychedelic experience, really was often a combination of these various philosophies, including New Age, Amazonian shamanism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. There's almost always a strong emphasis on spirituality and mysticism and oneness and inner transformation. So this is a picture at Hosh Yasmin, which is a cafe in Palestine or the West Bank. And it's one of the few places where Israelis and Palestinians can meet. It's a really magical cafe in the hillside, and we were lucky to conduct a bunch of our interviews there. It was really important for us to recognize that this conflict, like most conflicts, holds a huge power differential between Palestinians and Israelis. So we really held that in our interviews, and I ask you all to also hold that and as I share these quotes from people. I also we recognize the both optics and meaning of the Imperial College in England and an American nonprofit seeking to study peace in a land that was occupied by the British Empire, but really this land has been under occupation for generations and generations and generations, which is the reason that there is such need for healing in this land. So the first theme is one that's probably quite recognizable from other psychedelic research, this idea that all is one and all is unique. A Christian, Palestinian, Israeli woman says, "There are moments of love and open-heartedness, that we were all together. There is no, you are Jewish, Arab, Muslim, Christian. Everything was stripped. All this nonsense was out, and only acceptance and love were present." A Muslim Palestinian woman says, "We are all one in the sense that we came to help each other, to be with the other, and accept the other and his uniqueness, each one with his identity, but as one. You were born Jewish, so there must be a reason you were born Jewish. I was born Muslim and an Arab, so there must be a reason. The beauty is in the difference. We are not all the same. Who said we should all be the same? The beauty is in the difference and the diversity of different languages, the different frequencies. It is all physics. Everything has a wavelength. The Arab letters have a wavelength, Hebrew has a wavelength, English has a wavelength, you are a wavelength, I am a wavelength. There are endless wavelengths. And at the merging of all the wavelengths, there's one which encompasses all colors." A Muslim, Palestinian, Israeli man shares, "My brother, we are occupied. It doesn't matter, Arab, Israeli, Jews, Americans, Japanese, nor Chinese. We are occupied from a stronger force than us, and we are not aware of it. It occupies us in our food, in our drinks, in the cost of water that falls from the skies, and they collect and make us pay for it. It occupies how I walk on the street, what I wear, what music I hear. there's total occupation, not to Palestine or Israel, the micro and macro, all of it. And in order to rise above it, we must become human. We must accept one and two, accept each other's music, accept the differences that exist, because it's all a mosaic of the same canvas. We can accept and admit that our situation is bad. And I want to kind of elaborate a bit on this context, because I think he was not necessarily trying to equate, Palestinian and Israeli occupation, but the point that I really understood from this interview is that, occupation is there's much beyond the Israeli-Palestinian context, and that even Israelis experience inordinate amounts of trauma. Jewish people have experienced trauma intergenerationally from the beginning of time, and living in a country like Israel where many people are made to feel that all of their surrounding neighbors, don't want them to exist, that is also really a constant trauma. And of course, the Palestinian population experiences inordinate amounts of trauma as well. A Christian Palestinian man shares, I would say that we could accept the notion of separation when we fully embrace the notion of unity. Then from there, we could say, how do we honor and celebrate diversity? Not how do we create diversity because we are afraid of each other. Because the Jews are afraid demographically, or Palestinians are afraid demographically. It's the foundation of the issue for me. And so in a sense, we could only accept the two-state solution if we fully embrace the one-state solution first. Another emerging theme was how these experiences really impacted people's connection to their religion by often increasing feelings of spirituality and decreasing these fundamentalist, more rigid forms of connection to religion. If there is something that is infinite, so it clearly cannot be confronted with a story. That is what I see, even with the biblical scholars who join, and also with me and the Arabs. We all become more believing, but somehow less fundamentalist. In a sense, I am much deeper in Judaism than I was, but I understand much more how it lives with other conflicting opinions, because I'm not looking for a solution of contradictions, but on the contrary. This Christian Palestinian Israeli man didn't necessarily connect much more deeply with Christianity, but spoke a lot about the reverence and spiritual understanding he now had for the tradition that he really disconnected from before. And he says, the medicine made me much more accepting towards tradition and understanding of how important it is. In the first ceremony that I sat here alone, the Quran appeared, and it felt to be so heart-opening. It opened my heart. In the frequency of the Arabic language, my language, a frequency of words that maybe half I do not understand, but something opened me and brought me closer to joy, to understand the world from a different place. 5 or 10 years ago, I was ashamed to be Muslim because of the terrorists. They misunderstood, though. It's not like that. What are you doing? Killing in the name of God? It is not like that. Then I understood it's the opposite. So I came closer to what it means to be a human in Islam. To be a human is Islam. People's connection to the other also shifted greatly, which consisted a lot of deepening of appreciation and also a reduction of fear. There were also some really powerful visions and processing of collective and intergenerational trauma that occurred, but many of them are really long stories, so I look forward to sharing more of those stories later, but I will share one here. Almost every retreat, there's a moment in which the Palestinians present are comfortable enough to sing in Arabic. This is always an amazing moment. Suddenly, you hear your most hated language, by far, maybe the only language in the world that you really don't like, and suddenly it sends you to light and love. And I was recently reading a study of Israelis that shows that actually a majority of Israelis experience physical fear when they hear Arabic in public. And this tragedy I attribute to the really severe segregation in Israeli society, starting from schooling systems to towns where Jewish Israelis live separately from Palestinians. The other side of this singing experience, a Muslim Palestinian Israeli woman shares, in Israel, there is a resistance towards anything that is Arab, whether it is language or if it is a human, though they love the hummus. So I want to bring it by singing from a frequency that will touch. They come to me and ask me, will you sing to us tonight? They feel it opens for them. Whether it's a difficulty or a good thing, it helps them to see. At first, there might be resistance. That releases things inside. It might cleanse through laughter, through tears. They understand through the resistance and the journey they go through the night that it does them good. In the end, it really does them good. So as Madonna teaches us, really one of the most consistent things that people reported was how much the music made them come together, both in their hearing music in their own language, helping that really deepen your connection to your own religion and identity, how hearing music from the other language really opened you and reduced fear, and then even this more neutral language, music in a language that was neither, serving its own role in ceremony. So to switch gears a bit, this Christian Palestinian man speaks about a vision he had in ceremony where he literally was in the body of an Israeli soldier. So he says, I had this weird experience of being in the body of an Israeli soldier. It was like seconds of an experience. The whole experience was the eye looking down to shoot as a trigger is being pulled. And that's it. There's no more seeing after that. But I could feel him. And after, this is really painful. This is not an easy life after. And this man really reported a very deepening of compassion towards Israelis having to serve in the army. So these next few slides are going to be it's a long story and anecdote that I'm sharing from a Jewish Israeli man who's a veteran from the military, who's recounting a vision he had of a memory from a house arrest he conducted. So I do want to give that also as a warning that it does go into a bit of detail about a pretty traumatic incident of a house arrest. There was one session that a group came from the occupied territories. If I'm not mistaken, about 6 Palestinians, not Israeli Arabs. And what happened there was just that. Someone began to cry, and I heard the accent of the weeping somehow, and I recognized it. The minute I heard him cry, they were all sitting together. Suddenly, the ayahuasca showed me them as a separate unit within us, and another one began to cry, and it took me automatically to the madness of the pain of a whole people. I could see it. It was clear to me that they weren't like weeping because they remembered a dead aunt or something. They were weeping for the pain of their people, and I am connected to that pain. I caused the pain of their people. I began to break. I couldn't stand to hear them crying, and the ayahuasca, began showing me so much. I can't describe it visually, but this crazy pain and hate and crying for the evil they experienced, it built up and up. It was one of the most powerful experiences I had. Ayahuasca took me and put me in a situation that seemed quite real to me and separate from the room I was sitting in. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Now this is his flashback. I saw myself in a Jeep on the way to the arrest. We close in on the house and start making announcements to get the person out of the house. And what happens is that the door opens and we see an entire family sitting in the living room and screaming and banging and someone trying to run. And you just go into the house and catch everyone and sit them down and try to find him. And we took him out and the arrest was over. And then suddenly there was a cut in the scene. And it was as if I had gone back in time. And I was sitting with the family in the living room and I saw them drinking coffee. They were talking and laughing. The grandfather was playing with his grandson. They were enjoying themselves. There was a television on in the background. Everything was great. And then suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was very strange. I do not understand what is happening. I see the person I'm supposed to arrest escaping from the room, and then the grandmother or someone opens the door. And I just see myself like RoboCop with a ski mask. I see my eyes clearly. I look at me and I'm freezing from fear. I feel the heartbreak and intense fear in the room. I'm looking at myself, and I cannot believe that I am the person standing there. I look terrible, and I am aiming the weapon. I really feel the hatred toward me being built. And it was a terrible experience. I saw me and my friend arresting the guy. I took him out, the door closed, and I stayed with them. And I just see a family that is completely pulled into pieces. And at this moment, their world is shattered. I see the little brothers, and I'm sure we raised 3 generations of terrorists who will surely hate me. And maybe they will remember my eyes through the ski mask as the man who destroyed their lives. And it completely broke me up. I was really angry with myself and hated me and said, it does not matter, Israel, Palestine, whatever, I cannot believe I did that. Seeing those people, it gave me perspective on everyone who is in this situation, all directions. If as a soldier, I could say, well, his family are assholes too, they're shielding a terrorist, how can they send their boy to kill? And then suddenly I see them just as a grandmother and grandfather, wanting to live. And then they see me and hate me. And on the other hand, it was very confusing because I saw my eyes. Like the act was bad, but those eyes are not the eyes of an evil man. It was very confusing. It showed me all the inside everything. And I don't have time to give you a bit more information, but I'll say one thing after this. This man went to study Arabic and really changed a bit of his life. Oh, oops, sorry. A Muslim Palestinian man describes kind of the other context of this and says, sometimes within the heart of the session, yes, some fears would surface that I would feel, especially when I would get close to someone whose trauma was caused by an Arab, and the Arab is coming to help. But with time, I discovered there was actually a prescription for what will happen, like a blueprint for me and him, that at a point, this trauma must surface. So of course, knowing more about that gives you a lesson on how to maneuver to a more understanding space and what you need to do. Of course, this doesn't require intellect. It requires wisdom and listening. Jewish Israeli man recounts his first time crying in public, that suddenly he feels for the first time that he could connect with all the fathers who lost a child in the war, in the conflict here. Suddenly I had this thought, and it was also my first cry in public in a ceremony. Sorry, I'm going a little fast, a lot to cover. The last theme that emerged was this concept of peace starting from within. And the World Ayahuasca Conference recently even had that as a theme, an inner search for a better world. This Muslim Palestinian Israeli woman shares something that really, across the board, people express something quite similar to. Focus on yourself and make inner peace with yourself first. The peace starts within us. Each one will make the peace within himself. That is peace. And many folks did just stop there in a way and say, that is enough. When you make peace within yourself, that is how the world will move to peace. And other folks described how their own inner work and inner peace actually really impacted their external work as well. So this man recounts that my activism work has changed tremendously. A big part of what I realized was how much this activism, even nonviolent activism, was motivated by hatred towards the other. And my activism as nonviolence meant that I would expose them and I would amplify how terrible they are. So it was more of a demonizing nonviolence motivated by hatred, not by love and compassion. This same man describes, though, that the external reality is such that he can't go to a checkpoint and be like, I'm a human being, let me through. I'm a spiritual light being, you know? Even for me, it was a big challenge at one point. How can you heal trauma if the trauma is ongoing? You can't heal it, but you can just bring a shovel and dig some shit out every once in a while. More shit will come, but the more you dig out, the more space you create to where people are free to see things differently, to engage differently, and to be creative. This gender non-conforming Jewish Israeli person really beautifully expressed this kind of tension between the inner and outer work. They ask, how do I heal the inner political map within me to create change in the world? How do we heal the outer political map to create change within me? And how do I contain both? I can tell you that one of the illusions that I understand is that the Arab-Jewish conflict, as it is now, that we think this is the conflict of a century, is an internal conflict that will go on till the last drop of life. What Aya taught me about this conflict, one more time I'll say, is that it gave me the choice to belong to these conflicts or not, to look for what's common, not what's different. So when we asked all of our interviewees, how can ayahuasca help heal our planet and our broken politics? Also, almost everyone immediately said, give ayahuasca to Prime Minister Netanyahu or Abbas or Trump. And it certainly couldn't hurt, but I do think that wouldn't be the only thing. But it was really interesting. Everyone was very excited about that idea. Thank you for bearing with me with all of these long slides. I want to, in closing, share one more that really resonated with me. This Christian, Palestinian, Israeli woman asks or shares, in every region and in every land, there is also the medicine of the place itself. And the world is full. Harmala is Syrian rue, and there are a lot of legends that they use this plant with acacia or different plants around the Middle East, because every land has its own plants. And ayahuasca is amazing, really. It's mind-blowing, it's heart-opening, it does wonders. So we can use different plants from other places to help open up the plants in a certain place, but not as an idea of continuously using those. Instead, find the local. Harmala is not ayahuasca, just a little different, but it's the same experience. And the point is that it understands the people from this land. It understands the pain that the land has gone through, even the music in it. When you drink ayahuasca, you hear far away, you hear the jungle. Maybe you don't know how to explain it or to express it exactly with words, but you know what I mean, right? You feel the jungle, you feel the people from there, you feel those places. With Harmala, you feel a different local nature. You hear different music. With that, I want to thank Moshe Tov Krebs and MAPS for all of their strategic support and funding support. I also want to thank our supervisors, Rick Doblin, who's here, and Robin Carhart-Harris in London. And we're lucky to work with a bunch of different amazing professors from University of Haifa and Hebrew University. And yes, the back of Antwan's sweatshirt says spiritual gangster, which I love. Thank you. Two questions. Yes. All right, if I get to choose. Do you have the mic?
Hi. Thank you for your work. I am so curious about if you asked the participants, particularly those that have been soldiers, what inspired them to do this medicine? Knowing that they would be in the company of people they had opposed at different times. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I do think everyone really did come first and foremost with this idea of self-healing. And many Israeli soldiers definitely had experienced a lot of trauma. But I do think that the Jewish Israeli folks who opted into these mixed ceremonies, they definitely had another element. Even some of them talked about it, and some of them were just kind of like, oh, that was kind of what appeared. But, or people would say, I think there was kind of something deep-rooted that felt that it needed to be healed, perhaps. And honestly, a lot of the ceremonies also were made with a small group of Palestinians. And it really did range. I'm kind of trying to recount that some folks were really deep in process of this, and some folks were also we're recognizing some of the harms, but we're also deep in we're all people and not really as deep in the process as the anecdote I shared. One more question?
sects of Jews in Islam? I mean, was there more Orthodox or more Reform or more Sunni, more Shiites or Sufis or other branches? I mean, how did that work out?
I'd say a lot of Muslim participants did identify with a lot of Sufi principles, and I wonder if that was also part of the kind of spiritual journey. As far as Jews go, there were people from all different backgrounds, but I'm trying to remember, there were a few folks who were quite more conservative and Orthodox who did kind of change their way of being in relationship with that, but I would say that there were also a lot of more secular Jewish Israelis. That was actually a really big part of the community, and so that was really interesting to hear really about how this kind of reconnected to a different form of Judaism. In Israel, Judaism is also is really defined by the government in a way that there actually isn't as much flexibility in the practice. So I think this allowed people who had maybe distanced themselves to kind of reconnect in different more meaningful ways. Thank you all. First and foremost, with this idea of self-healing, and many Israeli soldiers definitely, have experienced a lot of trauma. But I do think that the Jewish Israeli folks who opted into these mixed ceremonies, they definitely had another element. Even some of them talked about it, and some of them are just kind of like, oh, that was kind of what appeared. But or people would say, I think there was kind of like something deep-rooted that felt that it needed to be healed, perhaps. And honestly, a lot of the ceremonies also were maybe a small group of Palestinians. And it really did range. I'm kind of trying to recount that, some folks were really deep in process with this. And some folks were also like, we're recognizing some of the harms, but we're also deep in we're all people and not really as deep in the process as the anecdote I shared. Well, thank you all.